Today is Donna Perlmutter. She is was dance and music critic for the former LA Herald Examiner. She's the author of Shadow Play, The Life of Anthony Tudor, and she currently writes for City Beat. Please welcome Donna Perlmutter.
I have a number of pieces that I've written about Carmelita. And what I would like to do, Elspeth, is send them to you to be put on the web page. Are you going to keep the web page? Good. Okay, great, great. But what I would like to do is just read you a few sentences. I realize this piece, which I wrote for the LA Times, is 22 years old. That's almost a quarter of a century. Anyway, Carmelita always fascinated me because, not just because she was a great artist, which was clear in the classes that she taught, but she was that kind of artist who was a poet. The greatest teachers are poets. I remember going to master classes given by Jacob Gimple, pianist. He too was a poet. These people have a way of getting inside what they're trying to convey to you in very poetic terms, terms that come to them in the moment and that immediately connect to the essence of what they're about and what they're trying to tell you. But why did she fascinate me? Because a talent of her order did not seem to be right. It didn't seem right that she was confined to a studio. What did she do? Not that she wasn't marvelous there. She was. You can all attest to that. But what was it that kept her from giving her art to the world, as the world surely would have received it as the greatest thing it was? Saul Hurok immediately recognized this about her. He signed her, and she was endlessly proud that he put her on his A circuit with Pablo Casals, with Artur Schnabel, and she felt that she had really arrived. And then she was grabbed by an inner terror. And here, I am not talking about stage fright. I'm talking about something so profound that, well, it drew me to try to document what happened. And between interviews I had with her, after I studied with her, took her classes, naturally that's how I came to know what a grand poet she was. And what an eccentric, and what a person who had her classes were her universe. They were her universe because she would bring Eric Bentley's HUAC, the House On-American Activities Committee, book, and she would sometimes spend half the class reading from it. It was her universe. It was her stage. It was the place she deposited all the things that mattered to her, her great social conscience, her great sense of the artist, She read to us Sylvia Plath. Just some of the things I'm trying to, I have some of this written down in this piece. She would have discussions on Robert Graves, on Sylvia Plath, on Antonin Artaud, the great dramatist, on Arthur Koestler, on the playwright Jean Genet, a political commentary by Dwight MacDonald, and literary critic George Steiner. Her universe was vast, and this was the natural repository for it. Her students in her classes, many of whom came and didn't know diddly squat or care. She soon found out who those people were, and they usually didn't last very long, because she was going to be teaching the whole person, not just the body. It was not training, as Julie said. It's not training.
You can go for exercise.
No. So Agnes had written in one of her books that this was a quote that Carmelita gave to Agnes, and it's a very powerful quote. She said, "People tell me that my unplanned oblivion was a tragedy. But I say no. Save that word for human suffering, for wars that kill innocent people, for the devastation of the poor and unwanted, for the corruption and cruelty that cause these things in the world. Mine is no tragedy. If art could relieve misery, I'd gladly sacrifice it." There came a point with Agnes, who was already associated with ballet theater in the beginning, when Agnes, despite her burning, I guess you could call it just jealousy, but her intense admiration of Carmelita, invited her to ballet theater. And people there like Anthony Tudor saw her, and people who had the sensibility to know what a great artist she was. But there was tragedy in this. She said her career was not tragedy, but there was tragedy here, because she said this too. She said, "The terrain I traveled led me into Goya's land of terror and blood-soaked pits." You saw that in some of those films. You saw the films with just her facial expressions. Those feelings, those experiences penetrated her. Even though, remember this, she never had the actual experience. People don't have to have the actual experience to know it, to understand it, to empathize with it. We don't have to go into battle to know that we are opposed to wars where people are killed. We don't have to personally be there, right? So she wasn't there, but she knew it. And she says, "I could not be a dancer of fine dreams and graveyard decor. So I danced hard about what I saw and lived. I was not an absentee landlord. I was one of the dispossessed." But you need to know that when I did some research and talked at length with Lee, her husband, Lee Friesen, it became clear that, as I wrote for this biography, this encyclopedia, in literal terms, she, Carmelita, knew only privilege and doting parents, and never encountered a land of terror with blood-soaked pits. Hers was purely a case of identification with its victims, an overt rallying to their cause, an imaginative leap. At its most profound, She tapped a kinship based on interior terror and ravaged spirit. And here's where that interior terror, I'll give you this one anecdote. I remember how much she talked about Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau, the great German baritone, and how she longed to hear him in person, and how there was an advance notice that he would be appearing at the Music Center. And many, many months before the performance, she and Lee bought tickets for his performance. And the night came, and they arrived there at the Music Center, and she moved into the row with Lee, and they took their seats, and they sat there. And the minute that Fischer-Dieskau walked out on the stage, she got up out of her seat and left the auditorium. Her identification was so fierce with him that she was empathizing with something that didn't exist within him, but only existed within herself. The terror of performing in front of that whole audience. She couldn't bear. As much as she wanted to hear him, as much as she loved his artistry, she could not stay there. She had to leave. And the same thing happened to her at ballet theater. And Agnes had no small part in all this. She was asked to do Giselle, and she found excuses not to do it. See if I can find this passage. She hated it, but as you saw in some of this, she could penetrate the character. There's no point in hating Giselle, because Giselle is the even Carmelita said, the Hamlet of the dance. That was the Hamlet of the dance. If anybody could do it, she could do it. But that wasn't what stopped her. That was her rationalization. It truly was. Because you saw, she could do Chaplin-esque things. She could do these, she understood the silly little character, and she also understood the depth of a character. One thing didn't exclude the other, or cancel the other, but anyway. So, this is what happened. Backstage at Ballet Theater for the piece that we saw here. Let's see if I can find this. She said, neither Lucia Chase, the artistic director of Ballet Theater, nor Agnes made good their promises. They promised her certain casts and rehearsal time and costumes, and being the perfectionist she was, she wouldn't compromise, and they didn't come through in the end. They didn't come through. We ended up like dried roots fighting with each other. None of the dancers they gave me knew castanets or heel work. It wasn't a ballet, it was a disaster. But Tudor came backstage afterward and said, by way of a compliment, this is where Tudor gets out and Maracci comes in. DeMille, reflecting on that April night at the Met, says she immediately told Maracci the ballet was no good. And shortly thereafter, quote, this is Agnes, because Carmi was always on the emotional brink, Donald Sadler had to carry her from the theater in his arms. And that wasn't the first time she committed career suicide. Yes, I was devastated, Maracci admitted. Agnes can be unbearably cruel. She came to my dressing room like a matador with people on both sides of her. She came to deliver the verdict, and she told me that Tudor always says what he doesn't mean, that he meant I'm no good. This is what the woman dealt with. This is why her career as a marvelous teacher was her refuge. She simply couldn't withstand. She did live in those blood-soaked pits, in her mind, in her heart, in her soul. She was ravaged with fear. And that's why we have a group of people here in Los Angeles and not the whole world. And that's why the whole world didn't know her. I'm going to put a lot of these materials out there on the website if anyone wants to see them.